Online all the time. southernfm.com.au.
And a very, very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much indeed for the pleasure of your illustrious company for the next couple of hours.
Are you talking to me?
Well, you were a bit included in that, Alex, I must confess, and gazing across at my erstwhile friend Alex Hehr over there. Say hi, Alex.
How are you?
I'm very well.
Has your week been good?
I haven't got a week bean. I've got a sort of. I've got a bean that's not quite healthy.
He does this all the time. We must introduce our very special guest.
A very, very special guest indeed, and I would like to say from the outset that I'm extremely honoured to be sitting here next to Pete Smith.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honour for me to be wedged between two vaudevillians, a first-class order from the sound of things. I don't know whether I can be up to grade with you two.
Now, you're no stranger to radio or television, Mr. Smith.
Well, neither's Dave here. I mean, cutting his teeth on English radio takes me back to when, my earliest do you remember Take It From Here?
I do indeed. Take It From Here with
Dick Bentley.
And
Jimmy Edwards.
Jimmy Edwards, of course.
Yes, that's right.
And I mean, he was one of the first expats, if you like, to really strike it big long before Barry Humphries hit the big time in England. And I mean, he was revered as far as I was concerned as a kid, listening to radio, watching Take It From Here. Take it from here, don't go away when you can take it from here. Wonderful. Right. And when I was a kid, as a schoolboy, I lived in Kewitt by that stage. I was about 12 or 13, mad on radio, of course. I used to take the tram down to Glenferrie to a department store called Walker's of Glenferrie. Nobody under my age remembers that place.
I remember
It was only
Walker's.
2 stories. Yeah, there was it's a supermarket like everything else, like the ABC, like everything else.
Yes.
It's a supermarket. But in those days, I'd go down there at Christmas, and I'd get in the lift, and I'd go up to the second floor and get out, and that's all there was. And it wasn't the toy department. Here's a pimply kid of 12 or 13 getting out in the ladies' underwear department or something, standing there for about 2 minutes before I had the intestinal fortitude to get back in the lift and go back down. The reason I did it was because the lift attendant was Dick Bentley's father.
Yes.
And I thought that was Christmas, and it almost was.
Yeah.
Goodness
So
me.
there's the love of radio for you, any connection whatsoever. But believe me, I mean, way before the Goon Show and that era, Take It From Here, Much Binding in the Marsh.
Oh, yes.
All those wonderful BBC
Beautiful.
shows.
And now I'm trying to think that there was another Australian comic who came over to England, and he used to say, I don't want to worry you, but I'm only here for 4 minutes. But Bill Kerr.
Bill Kerr.
Oh, Bill Kerr. Oh, gosh, well, Bill. Yeah.
Maybe
He really hit the big time, didn't he?
Maybe that
With Tony Hancock. He worked with Tony Hancock
he did.
a lot.
That's right. So he did. He was the real Ocker voice of Australia, wasn't he, over there at that time? But, so they were the days when we sat there watching, as kids. After tea, it'd be a regime. Mum would be sitting knitting on the couch. Dad would be reading the Herald. Mm-hmm. And I can recall me on the floor looking up at the mantel piece, looking at the mantel radio, watching Blue Hills, Take It From Here, The Search for the Golden Boomerang, When a Girl Marries, you name it.
That's exactly right.
Watching the
I'd
show.
get you would, and because it was theatre of the mind.
It was.
I remember I used to get into bed, and there was a serial block. It was about 4 15 or 12 minute pieces. When they put the ads in, it became 15 minutes. You had Tarzan, you had Superman, Biggles, and all those wonderful shows.
Such imagination, and luckily a few of those are available. Quite a few are available, aren't they, now on CD?
They are.
For, dyed-in-the-wool enthusiasts. But, you know, the only disappointment in coming down here, boys, I hate to start with a disappointment, there's no auditorium. Now, in the old days, if you recall, the biggest thrill of all, apart from listening to radio, was to go in. Most radio stations had their own auditorium.
They did.
I can remember AW, even though they were in Latrobe Street.
That's right.
They had one there opposite the King's Theatre in Russell Street.
That's in Russell
Used
Street.
to go in there and watch Rumpus Time with Jim Woody Wood. Remember all that?
God,
and they weren't the only ones, of course. The Trades Hall, they all had their own, radio auditoriums where they did their plays, or, you know, in Sydney, of course, I don't know where they'd had their auditoriums, but Jack Davies Pick a Box, all those shows, Pick a Box with Bob Dyer, rather, I'm sorry, and the Dual Act Show with Jack, and all that stuff was all done in auditoriums.
Macquarie Theatre.
Well, actually, Radio London also had an auditorium which was upstairs. It wasn't very big, but it was normally full when there was a live variety type show on.
Yeah.
It was great.
Well, I don't think you paid to go in. You might have had to ring for tickets or
That's
something.
right,
But,
you had to ring
but
for
it was
tickets.
still great entertainment
Absolutely.
for people, wasn't it?
And, you know, an amazing thing, listening to you two guys talking about Australian radio, which I find absolutely fascinating. Do you know there was a parallel universe going on in England? Although, you know, eons apart physically, there was all these shows that you were talking about. There were similar shows going on in England, so it sort of developed in the same sort of way.
Yeah, I mean, Dick Barton, Special Agent.
Oh yes.
And of course, although they were largely unseen, unheard of, the writers, that's where the key to the brilliance of it was, not just the performers. And of course, that's reflected, I think, in British television series.
Yeah.
Because
Galton
although
Simpson.
the wonderful hits from America, but there's something about the British sitcom scene, if you like, and drama scene that just can't be touched.
I mean, Hancock, the blood donor, that is just a class. It's absolutely.
We've played that.
We have.
Yeah.
But you look at, I mean, you can reel them off. We could just do titles for the whole hour here, couldn't we? But, you know, look at Fawlty Towers. There's a case in point. How many episodes? There were 11 or 12, maybe, tops.
I think, I don't know more than that.
That's it.
I mean,
and yet look at the brilliance of that, and it plays today as though it was as fresh as the first time it went to air.
Absolutely.
Don't mention the war. I think that's the funniest episode. And then the lady who's deaf,
hilarious.
and he has to raise
Marvellous.
That is stunning.
But, you know, with wonderful people, I mean, so many perhaps names we don't even know as names, but, you know, Dennis Norton stands out as, Frank Muir. And
one of my favourite shows is My Music.
Yes.
And My Word before that.
Yes.
My Word,
hosted by Jack Longland, Sir Jack Longland he became. But those two guys were constants in both those programs.
Did you have Desert Island Discs?
No, we didn't have that here. It didn't translate, but I think there was... See, I mentioned before that we had, I think a week or two ago, we were talking about Housewife's Choice in Britain. Here, AW had Choice of the People with John Masters.
That's right.
And they both used the same theme in Party Mood. The version they used in England was by the West End Celebrity Orchestra, and here it was the Charles Williams version.
Oh, okay. There's a bit of minute. You're amazing, Alex. You really are when you recall.
Because I just actually put that
business.
up. I put it up on my YouTube channel as the History of Light Music, because Charles Williams wrote it and his version was played out here by John Masters on AW. And at 3GL Geelong, they used it on Saturday night for Porter's Photographics program Snapshot Review.
Oh, gosh.
And that happened until we had the big EMI dispute in the early 1970s. Do you remember that?
Vaguely recall that, yes.
You couldn't play any EMI records.
That's right.
You had to swap over to a festival,
Yes.
Yeah, we had to change the theme we went to Joanna by some obscure pianist, but it didn't
sort
matter.
of put a few of the independents on the map in a way.
It did, very much so. Now listen, I've got a piece of music and I want to see how good your memory is of this piece. You probably might not know it, Dave,
right.
But have a listen to this, Pete, and see if you can, this might bring back a memory.
Yes, Yes, that's probably my most well-remembered tune from the golden age of In Melbourne Tonight and Graham Kennedy and so forth. It's Gee But You Swell.
Gee But You Swell.
And there are so many different versions of that. That's played, of course, by the Channel 9 Orchestra, and I don't know who would have been in charge at that time conducting the orchestra, because we went through quite a few people from Arthur Young all the way up to Graham Lyle and so forth, but certainly that is the best remembered one for me.
Piece of music comes from 1936. Russ Morgan's orchestra played as well. I've got a version by Benny Goodman, and I think the original version was by Dick Robertson and his orchestra.
Okay, there's a few available. And they're all very nice to listen to, and they're all, of course, strictly dance band. That's more of an up-tempo one. And Graham and Nigel Dick, who was the general manager at Channel 9 and general sales manager when I went there in '64. Nigel was only telling me last week that he went overseas and Graham went to New York, and they heard, I think, Jack Parr was using it. And so Graham brought it back and made it his own. Well,
I remember the first night they used it. I was watching TV and I heard this and I loved it.
It's a great piece.
It is it's such a wonderful piece. Gee But You Swell. And the whole thing, even the title is good. Gee But You Swell.
It's a wonderful title.
It was so exciting, the music.
Well, at 9:30, following Coronation Street, on came IMT, and my grandmother and her sister, my Auntie May, you weren't allowed to speak. Graham's on, there'd be a cup of tea made, and you'd sit down, now quiet, or you'll go to bed.
Yeah, and that was the office cooler talk the next day, wasn't it, no matter what happened?
Yeah.
And GLV 10 Gippsland, of course, we relay to them, a true relay.
Yes.
And once we had given them the nod on what time we'd be going on, it might be 9:31 even, but normally 9:30, everybody had to stick to that. Well, when you get up to Coronation Street, they sometimes had to alter the speed of the projector.
Yes.
Really?
Which would result in sometimes Violet Carson sounding a little bit up in the air, only slightly to get us into time when we'd agreed that that be the time. And of course, in those days, there was... well, you know, now they don't even have station ID. They go from one program bang into the other because they're so frightened that they'll lose the audience.
We used to have
in
the
those
clock,
days,
remember?
clock and time.
The clock. I used to love the clock. This is GTV-9 Melbourne.
That's it.
You compared IMT, didn't you, a couple of times?
Yes, Graham went on and on and on and on, never took a night off. He was in, rude health.
Yeah.
And but at one stage when he went overseas, myself, a few others, I think Tim Evans, Phil Brady, we all got the chance to do an IMT.
Have a listen to this and see whether you remember this particular night.
Awaiting the arrival of a brand new face from France, a figure of romance who has us in a trance. We hope that he'll be pleased to see us waiting on the shore, to see us waiting for the man that we adore. The gangplank comes in view, Monsieur and Sacre-Bleu, here is R.I.P.
Bonsoir. I'm sorry that I'm late, but I've been signing autographs since 8:15. Chérie, je vous aime beaucoup. In case you don't speak French, that simply means that I love you all.
Yes, and all done live too, I might tell you, and very nerve-wracking.
I can
I must say,
imagine.
stepping into the likes of Graham Kennedy's shoes, but that's what we did, and as rough around the edges as it was, people were watching.
Oh, they were.
Let's face it, they were staring at test patterns. Such was the novelty of pictures coming through the air. How could that possibly be?
Exactly right.
Peter, how much rehearsal did you have to do that song?
Well, the band track with the orchestra would have been recorded
And given to you?
and that would have been done earlier in the week.
Right.
And then you'd come in and you'd get 2 runs at it in the afternoon or early evening, and that would be it.
That would be it.
Lucky
Good Lord.
Pierre from New Faces of 52.
1952, one of the first LPs I bought.
Yes, I got that one too. It's
with Eartha
fantastic.
Kitt.
Yeah, Eartha Kitt.
Wonderful.
Robert Cleary was the...
Yes, that's right. He was the original performer of Lucky Pierre, but that's going back 54 years.
Yep.
Good Lord.
Yes.
Pete,
Where's the time gone?
a question I'm burning to ask you. What was Graham Kennedy like as a man? What was he like to work with?
Graham Kennedy was, well, let's face it, when television first started, there were no television personalities. Perhaps the same happened in England.
Sure.
Where did people come from? Well, they came from radio, newspapers, and nowhere. And before my time, Channel 9 had a telethon. They were very famous for telethons and giving back, something. It was the mindset of the management of the time, which was very noble, really. And year after year after year, the Urella telethon, of course, which is now Scope.
Yes.
But called Scope. But before the Urella era, they did very early on. They'd only been on the air a year, 18 months, something like that. They had a telethon for Red Cross. And of course, with only a few of their own personalities, people like Jeff Cork, who was already there, they decided that they'd bring people down who at least had some sort of, notoriety in the entertainment business, and they were radio announcers. So they had Nicky and Graham go down, and a lot of other people as well. And of course, the management were watching these people simply reading donations and maybe a little bit of banter in between.
Yeah.
And when Nicky and Graham came on, they saw some sort of magic spark in this kid.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have probably worked today, probably wouldn't have passed the standard. But let's face it, we were learning, everybody was learning, the audience were learning how to appreciate this new medium. And so Norm Spencer eyed this guy and realised that there was something there, and they almost on the spot offered him the role of compere for this 5 nights a week variety show.
Yeah.
And let's face it, it was true variety, wasn't it?
No
True
doubt about
variety,
that. No doubt about it.
which had its birth, I suppose, really, if you give it due consideration. It had its birth with the Tivoli, because in my opinion, you talk about variety today, and I don't know where you see an example of variety on television. Variety, in my opinion, is a singer, dancers, a juggler,
Adagio.
a magician, adagio, contortionist, whatever, music, more.
Doesn't
you don't
exist.
see that. A comedy sketch.
Yeah.
And of course, most of those wonderful comedy sketches, I don't know, Dave, how long have you been in Australia? Forgive me.
Since 1982.
Oh, okay. But you know by reputation
Oh, yes,
what we're
that's
talking
right.
about,
Of
don't
course. Same on British TV. I mean, they had shows exactly like you've just
Did they?
described. Oh, yes.
you? And of course, the reason most of it was going out live, not the reason we're going out today live, of course, because you could have recorded this a month ago and your listeners wouldn't know. But the reason it was all going out live, and people bemoan this fact today, why don't we see more live, it was because of the technical situation. Once you started recording things only on kinescope, this is prior to videotape, your technical quality went downhill.
Yeah.
If it was live, it was more likely to be as black and white as it was, more in pristine pictures. And so everything did go out live. So you can imagine the buzz in a place like Richmond Studios of Channel 9, same at Channel 7, but more so with Richmond, because they had more of a variety feel, whereas I think 7 swung more to sport.
Yes.
They excelled in that area. So it was quite a buzz.
So how much of IMT on a daily basis was made up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't like to put people like Mike McCall-Jones, who is still around and still writing gags for people, and even writes, although he doesn't like to talk about it and probably wouldn't like me talking about it, writes for prime ministers even.
Yeah.
But not gags necessarily, but, the way to go. I mean, he's been around a long, long time. Without putting them down, of course, a lot of it was ad-lib.
Sure.
But there was certainly an undercurrent of preparation. And if anything over the top of that, of which there was a lot, was cream on the cake.
Yeah.
And it was back in the era too, in a more, I use the word simple, but I don't mean simple as, simple exactly, but it was a less regulated time when commercials, which were a large part of the program, advertisements, really could take, well, I think the record for a 60-second commercial was 24 and a half minutes for a Pal dog food commercial.
Yeah.
When Rover the Wonder Dog, which was Graham's pet Labrador, golden retriever, wouldn't eat the food.
Oh.
Now, Graham was a winner. He didn't like, he liked to win, and he wasn't going to let the dog win. And somebody, unfortunately, they used to starve the dog during the day, so it'd run in and gobble the food up. But on this particular night, some skullduggery took place, and the dog was fed. So the dog came in on live television and wouldn't even snuffed its nose at the bowl of Pal dog food. Well, Kennedy wasn't going to let the dog win, and it went on for 24 and a half minutes, when I have to say the dog did win. Ended up, Rover walked off the set and relieved himself on the camera pedestal. That was the end of that. But, you know, the difference between sell and, you know, you think, oh, not another commercial these days, don't you? Yeah. But in those days, no, because the difference between the sell and the entertainment was smudged.
Exactly. And
blended in beautifully.
It was wonderful. Now, listen, speaking of selling, we've got to sell something because we have to stay paying the bills. So let's go to this break, and then we'll be back with some more.
You mean an informative interlude,
That's the one. That's the one.
Here's a question for you. Can you do better? Let's be more specific. Can you do better with your home loan? Bendigo Bank customers are paying off their home loans at a record rate. And when you have your home loan with Bendigo Bank, great things happen in your community. Local projects find funding, local clubs find sponsorship, and local schools benefit. So if you want a fresh start, drop into the Mentone East Community Bank branch of the Bendigo Bank, or visit bendigobank.com.au and be a part of something bigger. Lending criteria, terms, conditions, fees and charges apply. Full details and application. Proud Southern FM sponsor.
Hi Mum, how are you?
Okay, except my feet are killing me.
Have you been to Gilmore's?
I've been to the chemist around the corner, but just couldn't find anything comfy.
Have you been to Gilmore's?
Even at the mall, those shops just wouldn't help.
Yeah, but have you been to Gilmore's?
I just wish I could find a store that would fit me in shoes the way they used to.
Mum, at Gilmore's they do all that. I got mine at Gilmore's and I love them so much I'm getting another colour. Want to come?
Let's go. Where are they again?
It's Gilmore's Comfort Shoes at Glen Huntly, Heidelberg, Mitcham and online.
Southern FM sponsor.
I'm Ray Martin, and I was lucky enough to call Fred Hollows a mate and to witness his amazing sight restoring work. The operation he pioneered continues to free people from blindness today. You can imagine their joy when the bandages are removed and they can see. We call it the Fred Moment, and all it can take is a $25 donation to the Fred Hollows Foundation. If you'd like to make a Fred Moment happen, then please donate at hollows.org today.
Mix it up with me, Michael Egby, every Monday from 10 till midday. I play an eclectic mix of classics, new release, Aussie content and rarities to get your week started right. In the Mix on Monday with Michael on Southern FM, 10 till midday on 88.3.
Join Alex Hehr every Wednesday morning between 9 and 11 a.m. for Thanks for the Memory. Take a nostalgic trip with Alex with segments like Spot On, Jazz as You Like It, the top 5 of 50, million sellers, and much more. Thanks for the Memory with Alex Hehr on Southern FM 88.3. The sounds of the Bayside every Wednesday between 9 and 11.
Southern FM. The sounds of the Bayside.
You're listening to Midday Magic with Dave Caffey and Alex Hehr on Southern FM 88.3. The sounds of the Bayside.
one of my favourite pieces of music happens to be the Shadows playing The Boys, and a certain ABC young man back in the day doing the hit parade, the countdown of I think it was the top 8 or the top 10.
Oh, yes, I think we used to do the 10 top 10s of the week.
That's the
like
one.
That.
And
this
of course,
was, apart from that, we used to do that on Radio Australia as well.
Yes,
because,
indeed.
of course, Broadcast House, no longer there now, on the corner of William and Lonsdale. It's now the County Court.
Yep.
I shed a tear every time I go past there.
Do you
because,
really?
well, you know, that we had an underground bomb-proof studio. Because in those days, you didn't, during the war, when the place was built, or even before the war, no one knew whether we'd be under attack.
Yeah.
And they came pretty close during the Second World War.
I love the fact that one of my good friends is Bill Armstrong, and he was a balance officer.
Yes,
at
a
the
balance
ABC.
officer.
What is a balance?
What is a balance officer? Everyone asked Bill. Well, when they would do a broadcast, and if an orchestra was involved, for argument's sake, they had to balance it up. So you couldn't have the brass too heavy. And
I see.
So he would be in charge of adjusting
the mics. And all that.
Right, like a blender.
But it's a funny name, isn't it? It's a typical ABC old-fashioned name. But mind you, look, I grew up in that era, really, as a kid. Firstly as a messenger boy and then as a junior announcer with a lot of senior men, announcers who maybe only, Maury Lockie, who I went and saw hello to today, your old mate. And, people like that, John Sloan, Alan Bush, Charles Rosenthal, all these wonderful people, Keith Glover, my mentor, and a man who, when I got my first little second-hand car when I was 18, a little Morris 840 with a folding hood. If we were on the same night shift finishing at 11:30 or so, I'd drive this guy, this senior announcer, home to Ivanhoe, and his name was Eric Coleman.
Oh, yeah.
And he was the brother of the screen actor Ronald Coleman.
Wow.
Tale of Two Cities,
Yes,
Lost Horizons,
yes.
The Boys After the War. One came to Australia. Ronald went to America, and of course the rest is history.
It was
So,
amazing.
growing up in that sort of environment.
Was John Royal in Melbourne?
John, yes. Well, there were two John Royals.
Yeah, there wasn't there?
Martin,
had a very
Martin Royal.
Martin Royal.
Well, that's why John had to change the name and became known as John Royal. But John, of course, when television started, those of us who were chosen, not a lot, because there were personalities were frowned on.
Yeah.
So there weren't really many personalities. The personalities came from outside the place, like Eric Child with Jazz Unlimited or Rhythm Unlimited, whatever it was called. Kim Benathan in Adelaide.
That's
you
right.
Might remember that name.
One of my favourites was a bloke out of Sydney called Arch McCurdy.
Oh, yes, Arch McCurdy, very prominent, of course. And, of course, Russ Tyson, who used to do the breakfast show and Hospital Half Hour of a morning from Brisbane.
Gary Ord took over from him.
Oh, yes, that's right. Gary was a lovely man.
He's in Melbourne at an aged care facility.
I didn't know that. I thought he was up.
They came.
Margot Glenn.
She came down as well.
Well, you better give me a contact, will you?
I'll try and give you a contact. She did email me, and I said, if I've got it.
I don't know
still.
why you have to wait to do that on air, Alex. You're always full of surprises. But yes, growing up in that environment, and as I say, you talk about, sort of balance officer, which is unheard of, and talks officer it was. Now it'd be current affairs or something, wouldn't it?
Exactly right. And one of was it you that told me that the ABC was so strict with the playing an LP that they had to get somebody to bring up a stylus?
That's right. When LPs first came in,
Really?
we would have a list. If you were the duty announcer, as you are today, Dave, you would have, forgive me saying duty announcer, but that's what it was.
That's what it was, sure.
Not your afternoon personality, but duty announcer. You'd have your list typed of the records you were playing, 78s.
Yep.
And then one of them would be typed in red. That would mean that was a microgroove track. Now, you weren't entrusted with a microgroove stylus or recording. A balance officer, either Oliver Gilpin or Bill Armstrong, would have to be booked, in inverted commas, to play that track from a separate studio. Listen to your program, wait for your introduction to, say, Mantovani or something from the Cyril Stevens Spotlight Collection, which were the first LPs out there in Thornbury. I mean, what a pioneer he was. Long before W&G. Well, W&G, of course, they were prominent too, but he'd wait there in a separate studio. You'd say, now here's Mantovani. He'd play the track. You'd come in and back announce it, go on with your next 78. He'd very carefully put the You know,
Record
LP back
sleeve.
in the sleeve, take it back up to the record library with the stylus, that would be locked away until the next track was played.
Good Lord.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, so they were treated like gold.
I'm sitting here, my jaw honestly hung up.
No. Well, if you might even recall if you went into an auditorium or a radio studio, one of my first jobs was to stay back at night and take scout groups or charity groups on a tour of Broadcast House. Now, let's face it, today, with all due respect to where we're sitting in this very modern studio in downtown Brighton. Yes, thank you for telling me. Thank you. Too many sherbets this morning. But we're sitting in this lovely studio, but let's face it, all the moving parts have been removed. There's no moving parts.
No.
And so a little bit of the romance has been taken out of entertainment in general, I think, particularly in television, where, of course, film was clickety-clacketing through the projector and making that distinctive noise. That's all gone now. There are no moving parts. So all that's gone. But back in that day that we talk about just before I started, the evening shift of announcers on radio wore dinner suits.
I was going to ask you whether that was the same with the BBC.
Well, it was very much, it was copied from the BBC. The BBC, of course, were first with that, but your recognition of that only endorses what I've just said.
Yes.
So, but it goes to, and you say, oh, what rubbish, you know, sitting there and just, but no, it goes to the integrity, the discipline, and the whole, you know, classiness of what broadcasting was all about.
I suppose if the announcer
and that's not to take anything away from your very smart sports shirts, boys. Very smart.
I guess if the announcer was in a dinner suit, he would feel a good evening and welcome.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It was very much the show was in the business.
Yes.
There's a gentleman on radio, 3DB, and then he went to Channel 9. Sir Eric Pearce he became. What a lovely man. And you talked about him doing a radio program. I remember when he did a morning session with Nikki and Nancy Lee.
Oh, Nancy. Oh.
They worked together on 3AK. Oh, yeah. And it was. And the theme that they used was Lovely Lady by Frank Chacksfield and his orchestra.
Oh, beautiful.
Now, listen, what about a bit of music?
What about that?
See, I've picked out an Al Bowley. I think you might be a bit of an Al Bowley fan.
Yes, I'm an Al Bowley fan. And, in fact, I think I had a mutual friend of yours,
yes,
who's no longer with us, who had every 78 that Al Bowley ever put out.
And Dave knows him as well.
The only other person that I know of, or that I was told, had the full collection was Mrs. Bowley.
Yeah. So
don't know whether that's true.
Well, the
every 78.
The gentleman that you're talking about, I actually sold him Al Bowley's piano book. I actually had.
How wonderful!
Yeah. That's another story how I came about it.
It is a nice story.
Yeah, well, it was Al Bowley wasn't killed at the Café de Paris, we know that, but his piano, he apparently worked there a couple.
Didn't he get killed by the bomb?
Yes, but that was he was in his bedroom.
Yes, but
okay.
he was
the
working.
door blew in.
Yeah, he was working in High Wycombe, a place called High Wycombe. And anyway, this musician was in the Café de Paris and was there after the bomb had fallen there and found his piano book, brushed it off and took it.
Goodness.
And then...
we should say this is during the Second World War in London.
Oh, yes, that's right.
During the Blitz.
Of course. But, I mean, many years after the war, he had this thing, and I used to admire it so much. Oh, God, that's so beautiful. I'd love to own that. And one day he gave it to me.
How wonderful.
Yeah, and then it's ended up with, what's his...
John.
John, that's right. And I'd love to get it back.
Yes, well, good luck to you.
Good luck to you. Anyway,
yes.
let's have a listen to...
The family have kept everything in that collection, I think.
Yeah.
They've got it still, have they?
Well, I couldn't swear that they've got that particular item, but I would imagine they have.
I hope they've got the whole collection.
It's
of
a pity
Bowie.
because it should be on show, maybe.
It should be.
Yeah.
In the foyer of Southern FM.
Let's have a listen to the Arthur Lally Orchestra with Al on vocal, and this is the Dance of the Cuckoos. You'll remember this piece.
Love it.
a chance and do a new dance, for I'm cuckoo and you're cuckoo, sing tra-la-la-la-la. All the folks have all gone wild, oh what a howdy-do. It is because two funny chaps taught them all something new. Side by side you start to glide, forget all your troubles, let everything slide, for I'm cuckoo and you're cuckoo, sing tra-la-la-la-la.
Family Life is proud to announce the grand opening of our new community op shop on Thursday, February 22nd. The doors open at 4 p.m. and the night will be filled with live music, competitions, food, drink and amazing bargains. The shop will then be open for business 6 days a week. We look forward to seeing you at 1297 Nepean Highway, Cheltenham on February 22nd. Thank you from everyone at Family Life.
Southern FM sponsor.
Southern FM are a community radio station broadcasting to the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. At community stations, 5 minutes per hour may be used for sponsorship messages. This is a great way to promote your business and to stand out by letting our listeners know that you are supporting community radio. Packages range from sponsoring individual shows to monthly or annual arrangements. For more information, visit southernfm.com.au and check out our sponsorship area.
Hey Gary, what time you call this?
Yeah, the traffic was really bad. Oh, there's Steve-o. G'day, Steve. Morning. How's your weekend? Same old, same old. What'd you get up to? Not much. Are you okay, mate?
Looking out for one another is something we all need to do. So if a mate's struggling, ask, are you okay? Listen, encourage action, and check in again soon. Those 4 steps could change their life. Find out more at areyouok.org.au.
Every Saturday night at 11, relax and enjoy 30 minutes of cool, modern jazz from the 1950s and beyond. Hear the sounds and the people who changed the course of music on The Sounds of Jazz with Barry Skinner, Saturday nights at 11, only on Melbourne's Southern FM 88.3.
This is Midday Magic on Southern FM 88.3 with your hosts Dave Caffey and Alex Hehr.
And if you're wondering, the voice that just announced us, where that voice actually came from, well, it came from the gentleman that I'm sitting next to right now. You are tuned to 88.3 Southern FM, and this is live with Pete Smith.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. I can't get a better endorsement than that, can I? And John Vertigan there.
Yes, exactly.
His wonderful, distinctive tones.
Yes,
and, of course, so much
John
a part
Vertigan.
of the greater 3UZ as it was.
Oh, yeah.
Up at 45 Burke Street. And even beyond that, when they moved up to Carlton.
I used to love going past 3UZ, and they had the antenna, the mast on the roof at one stage, and they had the time pips could be heard across. And 3AW did the same.
Across.
Yeah, AW did the same when they were in Latrobe Street.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Remember?
And, of course, the DB masts are still there.
They are. I think there's a heritage.
Is that a heritage
Yeah,
thing?
I think everything you don't know what's a heritage.
I don't understand that, but still, I like them.
Now, you wanted to ask Pete something.
Well, I did. I read your very interesting bio, Peter, and I'd like to know more about your interest in British bands and British dance music of the 30s and 40s. It says that you had an interest. In fact, you've produced some programs.
Well, it's just the CDs that Bill Armstrong produced. There are two of them, double CDs. And it's interesting to reflect, as I think I said to you, that many of those tracks were recorded at the Abbey Road studios long before the Beatles were born.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
So what a wonderful centre that must be. And there is on the internet an Abbey Road studios tour.
Oh,
a
really?
virtual tour you can do.
So there you go.
And those people who are interested in the recording industry would be well, advised to have a look at that. It's very, very interesting, moving pictures through the whole setup. But I suppose my interest begins because they are the first records I got my hands on as a kid.
Yeah.
I think by the time I was buying 78s, they were about 7 shillings. And which is what, I suppose, 70 cents, but whatever, with inflation they would have been more, but 70 shillings. And I...
What, we're talking...
a 78, a 10-inch.
78.
A 10-inch 78.
Yeah.
But the first time I ever got my hands on some of those recordings were, of all places, at the Palais Pictures in St Kilda. I was very friendly with the Phillips brothers, who owned... the Palais and Luna Park, and in fact put that whole thing in. They built the Luna Park in Sydney with their, their co-owners. And so I spent many, many hours in the projection room of the Palais St Kilda with a guy called Albert Wright. And all I wanted to be was a projectionist. This was the closest I could get to Hollywood, if you like, for a kid. And for years, the projection room was in the dome of the wonderful dome. But when CinemaScope came in, they were forced to relocate the projection room to the back of the dress circle, which is quite a long throw in a place as big as that, because of the the keystoning of the picture, the distortion of the picture. They could get away with it with a standard screen, but once they went out right to the edge of the proscenium on each side, you couldn't do it. So they had to put in a completely new equipment, new bio box projection room. But in the old bio box, in the dome, there was a room that had been abandoned next door. Nobody went in it except a kid from St Kilda who was mad on the movies. That was the non-sync room. That was the room where, before the sound was married to the film optically, the film was really just a silent film with a 16-inch transcription disc played, geared through from that room, through the wall, into the projector. Well, you can imagine how synchronous it was. After a couple of runs on an acetate record, which most of them were, they weren't even pressings, you could imagine what it was like. Nothing like we experience at the movies today. But in that non-sync room, which had been abandoned, full of dust, were a lot of old records, which became the first in my collection. And some of those were 78s.
Wow.
Dance bands.
Yeah.
Gosh. And I suppose you probably listened to a few Bowley tracks amongst that.
Oh, very much so. Well, of course, he was so prominent. There would always be a Bowley track somewhere there, or Ray Noble.
Yeah, and it's quite amazing actually how you speak to people and yes, I love Al Bowley. And there's so many people that admire him and listen to him, but they don't really come to the surface until you actually dig a little bit.
No, well, all that era, and let's face it, I heard your Barry Skinner promotion for his jazz program on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, all that era that we're talking about, the British dance bands, the American dance band era, are totally different, completely different. All that, unless it's played on stations like Southern FM, is completely lost to the general public, and worse, completely lost to new generations growing up. My daughter, and this is going back 20 years, she would have been about 30, went to a wedding, and after the wedding, dancing all started, and they had a disc jockey, and they played Glenn Miller's In the Mood. She came home raving about this music she'd heard. Glenn Miller, In the Mood. Where is it, Dad? Where can I get that? I pulled out the album and said, here, dear, this is yours. Because, of course, it's lost on the general on radio.
No, that's right.
It's not played.
No.
That's
so
right.
thank goodness
for
stations like Southern FM.
Is that the CD that you're involved with? There's another nice track on this, which is one of my favourite pieces. It was the signature tune to a show on 3KZ, which was the Brighter Broadcasting Service. Have a listen to this. Well, the International Novelty Orchestra.
And the program was?
A Call from KZ.
Oh, for goodness sake. Your recall's amazing, Alex. You really... Dave could play you on a break with the overseas stuff, though, I'm sure. And you've been here since 48, Dave.
No,
so.
82.
82, okay, 82. All right, well, I was never good at math. But you've been practicing ever since, I'm sure, and so you can feel the affection,
of course,
that comes across from a guy like Alex, for instance.
Oh, absolutely,
and it matches yours.
Well, when I met Alex, I think there was a pretty immediate rapport, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was.
We started talking, never stopped talking.
We just
still do
babble on.
Well, I know we have a time constraint, so
well, we've got a few minutes to go, and we'll finish the final hour. But your time has been this hour, spending this hour with us.
Well, I've been looking forward to coming down for a long time. Ray Lawrence used to be on this station, one of my favourite voices ever on radio. His mellifluous tones.
I'll get something in a minute.
Pronounce it, but on AW, growing up, I think Ray must have been
3XY,
a little bit older than a 79-year-old like me. Well, I'm not quite 79.
No,
but
don't put your weight up.
I wanted to stay at 78, with the RPMs.
Have a listen to this one and see if you remember this.
Be a Darrod's girl, look for value with economy. Be a Darrod's girl, look for quality and style. Shop at Darrod's, the style store in Burke Street.
Yes, the Darrod's Wheel. With Graham and Panda and all those other wonderful hostesses.
Panda Lisner.
Carol Smith. Carol, now, Dennis Smith's wife, she was Carol Burke.
That's right.
And so many others as well, of course.
Darrod's, they were the style store in Berkshire, I think next to David or Buckley and Nunna's.
Yeah, I think they were, and then Myers down
that's right.
further. But I dread hearing that theme, actually, because... I had to do the voiceover if I was rostered on to do the tonight so-and-so's wearing, and all that sort of stuff. And one particular night, I wasn't in the booth.
Oh, no.
I was staring at ballet girls on the soundstage, and when I realised that Graham was about to throw to the Darrod's Wheel, I raced up the back stairs, and when I sat down in the booth, I was out of breath. And how I got through that, how I didn't get the sack, I don't know. So that brings back a few. Apart from the pleasant fact that my father's cousin is singing the song.
Yes.
Jeff Brooke.
Jeff Brooke. Yeah.
Really?
Have a listen to this, speaking of Ray Lawrence.
Reaching out to your community, the great southern sounds of Melbourne. 88.3 Southern FM.
That was when he was
got
here.
A wonderful voice.
Yeah, he
wonderful
did have a
voice.
great voice.
Yeah, he did. He did.
Well, it sounds as though he's not with us. He has got a wonderful voice.
He has got a
you
wonderful
mean,
voice.
Alex.
Oh, he has got a
Yeah.
Well, he had a wonderful voice on this station. He's now with someone else. But...
Is he?
Oh yeah.
Is he?
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Anyway, you share it all around. It's a wonderful big community, isn't it?
It is. It is. Pete, something final for Pete? Have you got?
Well, Pete, all I can say is that it's just been a wonderful experience for me to meet you, firstly, and also a doubly wonderful experience to hear all these tales of things that happened really before I got here, I guess.
Yeah.
But just fascinating to hear it all, and I really sort of feel like I've sort of lived through it, you know, although I didn't. And it's just been a great experience.
Well, I just think it, thanks for saying that, but I think it all gets back to what we talked about an affection for radio. You can take the man out of the radio, but, you know, the whole thing, but it really points back to, and I've been very blessed coming up through that era, because when I started there was no TV, so the emphasis on radio, and TV of course sucked a lot of the revenue out of, you know, the money out of putting things into radio, and radio had to answer back with things like talkback. Gosh, I can remember when, if anybody, it was forbidden to talk to anybody on a phone and broadcast it, and in fact when they finally reneged and allowed you to talk to somebody on the telephone, there had to be beeps every 7 seconds
That's
or
right.
so.
That's right.
So that you'd know that the man was talking on radio, or
and you were being recorded,
and you were being recorded, and so forth.
So they didn't have a 7-second delay, or?
Oh no, this is before. This was nothing to do with delays. That was another thing, of course, with delays. Now, of course, it's all done, you know, without, as we mentioned, moving parts.
That's right.
Which is just, you know, a bit of a sadness for those who worked in the business. But yeah, I've been very blessed, and it's a wonderful community thing, radio, and it goes beyond even the local community, because when I did that hit parade that you mentioned, the 10 top tunes of the week, as corny as it sounds now, it was also broadcast on Radio Australia, and I didn't realise the importance of it, you know. We broadcast into Asia during Sukarno's reign in Indonesia, when Western music was frowned on. So the only way they could hear the so-called voice of the free world was through Radio Australia, its news broadcasts, its commentaries, the Voice of America, of course. Those who had a shortwave radio could pick up the voice of the free world, Radio Australia, if you like, and they'd hear the hit parade. And about, oh gosh, it's nearly 30 years ago, because I've been away from the ABC for 54 years.
Wow.
About 30 years ago, I was walking down Burke Street, and this young fellow of obviously Asian, from somewhere in Asia, rushed up to me, this young bloke, all beaming and smiling, saying, "Oh, hi, can I say hello?" And I was taken, you know, when somebody rushes up to you, but he was all cheery and put his hand out to shake my hand. He said, "Oh, can I say hello to you? You're Pete Smith, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." I was taken aback a bit, and he said, "Oh, I just want to say hello to you, because when I was a little boy, my father had a shortwave radio. We lived in a village in Sarawak, and we used to listen to your hit parade." And he said, "I just want to shake your hands because I'm now working at Radio Australia as an interpreter." And I thought, what a powerful thing that is.
That's fantastic.
And you know, myself and Phil Brady and a lot of my friends, we still correspond with people who used to listen to my hit parade overseas,
right,
in America.
Isn't that amazing?
And now, of course, we correspond in this modern email way, but you know, from all those years
Stunning.
ago, that's the sort of community that radio creates.
It does, because...
No need to tell you boys that.
No. You hear the voice, and the voice becomes the person. Although you don't actually see the person, you feel them, you know?
Yeah, well, for 21 years I got away with annoying people at 7 o'clock saying, "Sale of the century." And luckily I got away with it, you know.
Yeah, and you did it wonderfully, my friend.
I didn't get told to shut up.
Exactly. We're going to play out to the news at the top of the hour with the wonderful Al Bowley, Hang Out the Stars in Indiana. Pete Smith, thank you so much for being our guest. I'm sure you've enjoyed it as well, Dave.
Peter,
been my pleasure, Dave. Thank you, Alex.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
To sing to you How could I find the things I sought for? No wonder they were all denied. The very happiness I fought for was right there by your side. So wait for me in Indiana, and when the long, long day is through, hang out the stars in Indiana to light my way back home to you.